Just like our other eukaryotic groups, we are going to talk about a few of the important fungi taxa that we have. Our textbook goes into a little bit of detail on 4 different groups. We're only going to cover 3 and just very, very briefly. And then we're going to talk about some of the ecological niches that these different fungi fulfill and why some of them are particularly important. Table 23.3 talk about some of the terrestrial fungi. This is just very, very brief. You will need to know just the little tiny bit that we cover in lecture. You don't have to go learn much more. Really, we're not even going to cover too many examples here. Mostly, I just want you to understand why we care about fungi. So we care about fungi because they do some really important things for us in the environment. One of the things that they do is form a relationship with plants. And the glomeromycota fungi tend to do this quite frequently. They form a structure called mycorrhizae. Now, a mycorrhizae is a fungal hypha that has formed a symbiotic relationship with a plant cell. This image here shows one type, the arbuscular mycorrhizae, and the arbuscular mycorrhizae grow into the plant cell wall and into the cytoplasm of the plant. This then becomes a mutualistic association or a symbiotic relationship. Plants provide food, essentially sugars from photosynthesis to the fungi, and the fungi provide minerals to the plant. So we saw those really long, thin hyphae that can spread through the soil. And what they do is essentially increase the surface area for the plant roots. So plant roots are already thin and branching, but the mycorrhizae will actually increase that surface area even greater because they're much smaller. They can spread much more quickly and through the substrate. So those fungal hyphae are going to help the plant cell absorb more nutrients from their environment. And this is really important because without fungi, many plants would not survive. And in fact, early plants could not have moved to nutrient-poor soil on land without fungi. So when we get to chapter 25, we're going to talk about this movement to land and why fungi were so important. Next, we have the Ascomycetes. These guys are important because they tend to be decomposers. So they are named for their ascus. Ascus is the Greek word for bag or sac. So they have reproductive structures that look like a bag or a sac. So that's why they're called Ascomycetes. This particular example is basically a cup shape. So it is a cup fungi. And again, this is their reproductive structure, so we're going to release spores from there. There are many Ascomycetes that are important for decomposition. Some of them are also disease-causing organisms. So just like our protists and our bacteria, there are some of them that cause trouble. Some of the Ascomycetes you might be familiar with, if you are familiar with them at all, are truffles and morels. They both fall into the Asci group. The last one we're going to speak about are the Basidiomycetes. Their name comes from the word basidium, which means club. So these guys tend to have club-shaped reproductive structures. Some of them are kind of flattened clubs, but these are also important as decomposers and forming associations with plants. These guys have a wide variety of structures. So we've got mushrooms, puffballs, stinkhorns, shells, rusts, and smuts. The rusts and smuts kind of look like almost like vomit or something down on the ground. Sometimes you'll see these They're kind of yellowish or whitish, reddish. And they really look kind of like something has spilled, basically. But these guys are important, again, as decomposers. This particular example, the shelf fungi, is growing on tree bark. So that means that the hyphae are growing into and through that tree bark. Fungi are important because they are decomposers. Now, if you're in a semester where we've already talked about ecology, you'll know that decomposers are super, super important for energy recycling. Nutrient, not so much energy, nutrient recycling through an environment. So basically what happens is an organism dies, a decomposer such as a bacteria or a fungi begins to break it down. And when they break it down, those nutrients can be released back into the soil, because remember, they are digesting their substrate, they're secreting those enzymes, and they may not digest everything or pull everything in. And then when the fungi die as well, then the nutrients are released from them. So they are essential because they are our waste disposal. Without them, we would just be covered in oceans of dead bodies, dead organisms, I should say. It doesn't sound quite as awful when we say dead organisms. But fungi are super important in that. They also release carbon dioxide because they are performing cellular respiration. They're not plants, so they're not taking it in, but they are releasing it. And of course, they're releasing those minerals from organisms that they decompose. Unfortunately, we do have some pathogenic fungi. Fungi cause diseases in plants and animals. A couple of examples here of diseases in animals, particularly people, are athlete's foot and yeast infections. If you've ever had or do have one of these two, you'll know that they're relatively hard to get rid of. And that's because from an evolutionary standpoint, fungi are relatively close to animals. And so it's a little bit harder to treat them because their cells are so similar and a lot of their processes are similar. Wheat rust is an example of a plant fungi. On the wheat plant here, you can see that it is turned yellow. That's why they call it rust. You can see these, the middle one. You can see the Puccinia graminis spores, fruiting bodies, and the spores being released from there. So this is an issue with wheat plants. It will end up killing the plant eventually, which means economic loss to the people who are growing them. On the outside, we've got athlete's foot and yeast infection. We already looked at a picture of yeast. It's a different type of yeast, but it does look the same. You can see it budding as well. And then we also have mutualistic fungi. Again, mutualism is a symbiotic relationship, so everybody benefits. We are going to come back a little bit in chapter 25 and talk about these guys. Fungi can also have relationships with animals, algae, bacteria. The two that we are going to look at are relationship with plants, the mycorrhizae, and then a relationship with bacteria to form lichen. Lichen are important because they break down rocks, which basically means they help to build up soil. So we'll come back to that when we get to our plant chapter and talk about how both mycorrhizae and lichens help to move plants to land.